All right, so part 3 of my experience at Bethel, I just want to include a couple more stories and then conclude with like how I ended up getting kicked out of Bethel. First off, like one of my kind of my assignments in Bethel, I was in the bindery, I was in the shipping department. And then one of the last assignments that I ended with was this kind of weird assignment that they kind of got rid of, where we would deliver literature to New York City. We would get up early, 3 a.m., pack a truck full of literature, and it was more cost efficient, apparently, or maybe not. It was just tradition, but to bring the literature and ship it ourselves to the congregations around New York City. So that was a nice change of pace from Bethel. I got to like leave Bethel facility and like we got to sightsee and drive around New York City, deliver to these other congregations. And, some of the congregations would treat us like royalty. We'd show up and they'd have breakfast for us and everything. But one thing that was interesting there is, since we weren't at Bethel, we'd had to find lunch. We'd had to go out and eat lunch. And depending the brother you were with, it could be a really bad lunch. Like, he's like, one brother was really cheap. It was Bethel's credit card. And he was like, well, these are the brother's funds. And so we would go to like 7-Eleven and stuff and get lunch. But props to him. He was just trying to be like financially responsible. But the other brothers, like one brother, he'd be like, we're going to Cheesecake Factory. We're going to this rib place. We're going to like this nice restaurant I heard, and we'd be using Bethel credit card. Not those home cooked meals at Bethel, but some of these meals were expensive. Like you could just get whatever you want. And I found that pretty interesting that we could go around New York City and trying all these restaurants on Bethel's money. But that was one story. Another story I want to share is the commuting situation, the commuters up in Bethel. A lot of commuter sisters. And I think the funniest thing is a lot of them will move up there and you'd hear the same thing over and over again. You'd be like, oh, I just came up here to serve God, more. See where I could serve God more, in the organization. And then like 3 or 4 months later, they're dating. Like that. Not every sister. I know some really good sisters up there that are trying to do good and like are dedicated to whatever their mission is. But a lot of them up there just come up to find a marriage mate. That's low-key what it is. They go up there and they want a Bethel boy. And it's very, very flirtatious up there. A lot of drama from what I recall, people wanting this and that and chasing after this brother and this brother chasing these brothers, fighting over this sister, and that's just the way it was. And that's the good ending of the story. Sometimes, commuter sisters come up and I could get feelings from them. I could get vibes. I'm like, you guys are no good. And then sure enough, like one of them gets reproved or disfellowshipped or whatever, that was nothing new. Another thing I want to talk about is the Bethel video that they showed to brothers and sisters about like touching each other and stuff like that. And they played that the first time when I was up there. And I'm sure they play it to new Bethelites, but it was like new at the time they showed it to us. And I remember they said that we're going to play a video for everybody. All brothers go to the Walk Hill Auditorium at this time. All right, so we showed up and sat down. It was like we didn't know what the video was about, nothing. And then they just press play. And they play that entire video in full of an auditorium. This should have been a private video. I don't know. Honestly, you don't even need a video like this. The video explains itself. Like there's a problem going around with like just touching people at Bethel, and I've heard those stories of like a sexual assault and stuff, but they were like playing it right in front of us, and you could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet in that auditorium. It was so quiet. And then as soon as the video was over, everybody just left. I remember that. Everybody was just like, we just looked at each other and we're like, okay, this is awkward. We're just leaving. And nobody talked. We just went back to our assignments. And then another story I want to share is like my experience with the infirmary. I didn't work there, but I had a few friends that did work there. And I won't give out any names or anything because, HIPAA violations. But some things about the infirmary were like really interesting that I experienced, or the stories I've heard. Straight up elderly abuse. I had one friend that was getting trained in the infirmary in Walk Hill. It was more like a dementia care unit, if that makes sense. Like there's assisted living facilities like in Fishkill and other locations where they haven't completely lost their mind yet, but Walk Hill is more like a specialized area for elderly people. But when he was getting trained, there was this one brother that was training him and like went into the room of this one elderly brother, and he was like, and I knew this brother, the one that was training my friend. Not a good person. Very, very rude, very brash, very like just not a good person at all. I had heard so many stories about him, but he was like slapped one of the brothers that was like in a comatose state, like slapped him on the face. This is what my friend told me. So I don't know, I can't confirm the veracity, but I trust my friend enough to know that this is true. I was like, no, he didn't do that. And he was like, yeah. He's like, watch, he won't do anything. And he slapped him. And I was like, really? Really, he did that? He's like, yes. And I just was so shocked how they treat that. I've heard stories of people in the elderly ones in the infirmary, like hitting on sisters, saying like crude things to sisters. I'm not sure what their mental faculty states are, but like sometimes I feel like when that's gone, when the dementia starts taking over, like maybe your true nature comes out. Again, I'm not sure on the science of that, but one example where this sister was wearing a red dress or something, and they were like, oh, the harlot, you're the harlot, the sitting on the beast, and like saying all these crazy things. They would try to put on the JW broadcasting for certain people, and they would be like, they would think it's apostate material because it's just new to them. They did, in their era, in their time, they never had JW broadcasting. They're like, turn off that apostate material. It's crazy. And another one where he was like battling demons. He was like, I remember my friend told me he was trying to put him to sleep and walk out. And he was like, no, don't leave me. The demons, they're here. They're in the closet, or they're all around me or whatever. That's crazy to me. That is crazy. And who knows what he's battling in his mind. But I've also heard stories where they gave them the wrong medication accidentally. They gave some elderly ones the wrong medication. They were giving them something else that he shouldn't be taking, or he got mixed up. Another thing that people might not know is that there's like a suicide room in Bethel. In the infirmary, there's, no ledges, everything's nice and rounded corners, nothing that you can hurt yourself on. And yes, people have committed suicide at Bethel before. I'm not sure if it happened during my time period, but I've heard that it has happened before at Bethel. And it's so sad, that people have to go through that. And I think part of me that woke up, like, that planted seeds in me is when I got to spend time around the infirmary and hang out with some of the elderly ones, or even in Bethel in general, hanging out with the elderly ones that were there with Nathan Knorr, that were there around that time period, that have that, like, passed down history, not the revisionist history that Jehovah's Witnesses try to present through their publications, but they were there and they experienced it. They would tell me stories like, Nathan Knorr used to run the entire organization practically. He was the president. And they would tell me, like, whatever he said, you would do. And I never heard that before. I was like, really? And they were like, yeah, he practically ran the organization. It was like a company, and he was the president and the board of directors, and, and so I would hear these tidbits of information from elderly ones at Bethel that were passed down, and I just was like, it was completely new to me. I'd never really read any of this, or maybe, you read a sanitized version of it from a publication, but hearing it firsthand from the elderly ones, you realize that, there's like two stories being told. There's like real information and then the sanitized version of it that we print in our publications. But yeah, those are just some wrapping up stories that I wanted to share with you guys. But fast forward to the end of my life at Bethel. Like I said, I had been dating this sister at the time. Things were going good. I kept in touch with her every week. We did family worship. She came up to visit, all this stuff. And the more and more I matured, because Bethel was kind of really my first time living on my own, the more I realized I wasn't ready for marriage. And I don't want it to frame it as like I took the bigger and better deal, or I wanted the bigger and better deal, like at Bethel, and like, sure, it was fun and stuff like that. But I really was reflecting on whether or not I was ready to be like a spiritual head, be a family. I was planning to stay there a year and come back. I didn't even have a job lined up. I didn't even have a career or anything. I didn't have a skill or trade or anything. I'm like, how am I going to support a family? How am I going to I don't feel ready. I realize how many things I need to work on my life. I seriously began contemplating whether I should continue the relationship. And I would bring this up in conversation with her. I would say, I don't know if I'm ready to be married. Like, I want us to be successful, and I want you to have somebody that knows what they're doing. Like, I don't want you to wait on me, but like, I kept telling her I don't feel ready. This was a conversation that came up frequently towards the end of my period at Bethel. And she would just be like, no, she just wanted to get married, is what I realized. She's like, no, you're ready. You're fine. Don't listen to them. Like, I know these people better than you. Because I would say like things that my elders shared with me, like advice, and not all of it was bad, but some of it was good, like maturing wise. And she's like, they don't know you like I do, and this and that. I was so divided, man. And I did more and more research, and I prayed and prayed and prayed about it, because I really love this sister. I really did. She meant the world to me. If you only understood how I really felt about her. Because what happened afterwards was just so terrible. And I realized that she didn't love me. But eventually I made the decision to break up with her. And I am a very old-fashioned type of person. I would have gone in person. I asked my parents if they could fly me out to Oklahoma. And they couldn't afford that. And I couldn't afford it. I didn't have money to fly out there. I didn't know when I could break up with her. So I'm like, I don't know, the next time, I don't want her to come up here. Like, I would rather go out there. Whatever. But my circumstances, I couldn't go out there personally to break up with her. So I FaceTimed her, and I said a prayer beforehand. I said, let's say a prayer. And then I told her that we should end this relationship because I'm not ready. I didn't feel like I was ready. And, we both cried. We both bawled our eyes out. It was very, very tough for us. It was tough for me. I didn't want to do that. Selfish me would have said, yeah, let's get married because, I want to have sex and get married. What, I don't know. But I was trying not to be selfish. I realized I wasn't ready, and that wouldn't be fair to her. So I broke up with her, and I thought that was the end of that. Well, about like 2 or 3 weeks later, I get called into my overseer's office, or by one of my elders, and they talk with me, and they said they received a very concerning letter from her dad. Mind you, I never heard this letter before. I never got to see it. I have never saw it to this day. I've never seen it. I was never allowed to like analyze it and see what was true in it about it or not. But they said they're gonna have to do an investigation about me and like, my relationship with her and everything. And that lasted over a period of 4 months. Every now and then, they would call me into the office and ask me a bunch of questions. And they would ask me, it was 2 brothers I never knew. Okay, one of them I did know, they were in my congregation, but I barely ever talked to them. When you're in a congregation with many elders, you don't get to know every elder. But I talked to him, and then another elder I never met before. He was just a Bethel elder. He was in one of the dramas, though, I can tell you that. But they would ask me questions like, how serious were you about marriage? Did you ever talk about birth control? Did you ever talk about having sex? Did you ever talk about planning a wedding date? Did you ever talk about this and that? And there was just very intrusive questions. And I gave them all honest answers, like, of course, like, what is dating for if you're not planning to get married? Like, of course the topic came up, but we hadn't planned anything. We hadn't planned a marriage. We hadn't planned anything. I didn't even propose to her. And they're like, what's the promise ring? I was like, I gave that to her, and I told her when I gave that to her, it was just like a promise that I would be faithful while I was up in New York, because I heard there was a lot of faithful sisters. Like, I explained this to her. I told her that it wasn't an engagement ring. Like, and that was such a stupid decision on my part. I would have never given her the pinky ring if they would have made a deal about it. But apparently that her dad, and what frustrates me more is her dad wrote the letter. She didn't even write the letter to me. Like, you're that impersonal that you had your dad write a letter? Or maybe her dad was just upset. I don't even know the whole story to this day, because I wasn't allowed to hear her side of the story. I wasn't allowed to hear. All that happened to me was I was interrogated for 4 months, asking questions about my private life. I had to show them messages between me and her. And this was hurtful because I loved her. I broke up with her and I didn't want to. I was trying to make a good decision for the both of us. And here I'm being treated like a villain through this heartbreaking time period. It was the emotional stress. And I don't know whether I'm going to serve at Bethel, this assignment I've been working for, and all this. I had a perfect, untarnished record. I never ever dated anybody before her, because I was like very picky, very selective. And like, I was just portrayed to be some and then she would send me messages like, what you did was wrong, and this and that, and like this. And I would show the elders this. I'm like, look, she's trying to message me and say like I'm a terrible person, and I was like, this is not true. Like, you can talk to my family, you can talk to the people I treat. Like, when it was just completely baseless accusations. If you knew who I was, I am a good person. I don't treat anybody disrespectfully, especially someone I love and care about. And they didn't care. They didn't care about my testimony or anything. It was just like I was already guilty. They were just looking for the evidence. It's not like the judicial court system where you're innocent until proven guilty. No, you're guilty until proven innocent in Jehovah's Witnesses. I guarantee you that. And this was so stressful in my life. I remember waking up crying sometimes. I would just wake up and I'd be sobbing. I've never had that in my life since then. And yeah, so 4 months I went through that, and eventually they concluded that we were like engaged. They said we were engaged because I'll have to find the article. It was like from the 60s, where an article said if you give someone the expectation that marriage is the only outcome, then you're considered to be engaged. And I'm like, when did I ever? For any witness, marriage is the expected outcome. Like, if you're dating someone, like, I'm not going to date someone just for the hell of it. I'm going to date because I could view myself getting married to this person. But the deal isn't done until I propose to them. It was absolutely absurd. And I just sat there and I took it all. I just was like, I didn't want to be rebellious. I didn't want to disagree with them. I just sat there, tail tucked between my legs, and was just like, okay, if this is what is the counsel I need, then I guess it's what the counsel I need. You know, they printed out all these pamphlets for me, these watchtowers for me to go over. And they said, you can go home, you know, you can pick your end date in the next couple weeks. And when you go back to your congregation, you can't pioneer, or, you know, you're not going to be a servant anymore. You can't pioneer, and you won't get privileges for at least 6 months. Any privileges. And I just was like, it was like a stab to my heart. I was like, I can't believe, like, I had a perfect reputation. None of that was ever taken into account. None of that. Over something, over a personal relationship I had with someone. But yeah, that's my story. I'm going to make one more part to kind of explain the fallout after I went home from Bethel, and how the elders treated me when I got home. And because I went back to the same congregation where she was, and that was a whole story. And that should be the end of this series. But hope you guys have a great morning, and thank you guys all for the comments, the support, and the heartfelt comments. I just really appreciate them. I've counted over like 9 or 10 people who have reached out to me that I knew up in New York that have left the organization. And that just, like, oh, it makes me so happy. Like, more and more people are waking up. So I hope you guys have a great day.